The Steelers are eliminated, but if you still want to get in on the NFL divisional round action, today's sponsor of the Bleav in Steelers show is BetOnline.ag, and there's no better place to do it than that. There's so much you can wager on: in-game betting, over-unders, player props, spreads, eventually Pittsburgh Steelers futures. If you want to get in on the action, BetOnline.ag is the place to do it. Head over to BetOnline.ag today. BetOnline, the game starts here. Welcome into the Bleav in Steelers show. My name is Mark Bergin. I'm really, really excited. First time talking to today's guest. He is host of the Arthur Moats show and the Arthur Moats Experience. Don't cross the moats. It's former Steelers linebacker Arthur Moats. Arthur, welcome in.
Hey, man, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. First, I want to start out is Deke doing okay? You were trying to cheer him up after the loss, man. Is he doing all right?
Listen, he is taking the loss really, really hard, man, but rightfully so. When you talk about the passion, the fan base, that's what we love, Steelers Nation. It's real, but they wear it on their sleeve. So, of course, when you take that wild card loss and you add the amount of one and dones that we've experienced of lately, yeah, he's taking it a little hard today, man.
Yeah, man. You were trying to cheer him up, and I can tell it's a perfect mix that you guys got out there because you're glass half full, he's glass half empty, and you're like,
hey, absolutely.
Still got Pitt women's hoops and everything too, man. But
I was like, yeah, it was an impressive comeback by the Lady Hoopers out there, man. I was like, you got to feel good about that. No, all of it's bad. It's all bad right now.
Oh, man. Well, it's going to be a big offseason for the Steelers. You're kind of stuck in the purgatory of you can't quite become elite. You're not bad enough to bottom out. I want to start very open-ended, and then we could get into more specifics. Arthur, I'm going to give you the keys to the Cadillac. If you were running the Steelers, what changes do you think that they need to make this offseason?
Yeah, I think the first thing we have to do is get me a playmaker at the wide receiver position on offense. As much as I'm a fan of George Pickens, this is another year where he really hasn't taken that next step to being that bona fide top 10 caliber guy that we think he's capable of, right? Those 1,100 type of yard receivers that we know you just throw it over there too. And that's the guy you really have to game plan for. So I either want to bring in a guy that legitimately is that or get the closest thing to that to pair with GP. So now I have legitimate firepower at the wide receiver position. Defensively, I have to create I got to create some money. So I got to go to my big pay guys and I'm restructuring. And the reason why I have to do that is this. Clearly, we've seen the impact that a top 5 edge, top 5 safety, and a top 5 interior D lineman have on a game. And we see what that impact is over the span of 17 games. And then you see it in the postseason. But the flip side is we see what the impact of a top 10 quarterback could be. The top 10 wide receiver, a top 10 caliber running back, like a legit guy. And it's like, man, those guys impact the game in a greater way. When we talk about schematically being able to take defenders out of the game, one of the big issues with Minkah this year were teams were avoiding him. They were trying to do certain things to not put the ball in harm's way, which is a ton of respect to Minkah. But when we're looking at the end of the season and we're saying, man, it was just one interception, and this is what, we kind of already have accounted for you, we don't feel like we're getting the same type of return that we would have liked to have had. Whereas on offense, man, we've seen it. Guy goes out there, all you need to do is get you one catch a game for, if it's a bomb or if it's one of those big time explosive plays, we're like, oh yeah, it feels worth it. Right. Or you got that quarterback that, for say, he going 250, 225, 250, like always in that range, not going to like it helps the impact of it. You just feel that a lot more. So to me, I'm thinking those would be the changes that I would make. It's more of a philosophical, instead of it being more defense oriented. I want to get that shift back a little bit to the offensive side, because I do feel, based on the trends of the NFL, you have to be able to score at a more frequent and more consistent clip than we currently are right now.
Yeah. I think we're along the same lines. My general thesis is this. I've looked at this offseason. The free agent quarterbacks leave a lot to be desired. You look at this year's draft. There's 2 guys. There's Cam Ward. There's Shedeur Sanders. You're not going to be able to pick them at number 21. Mm-hmm. So what I would do if I were the Pittsburgh Steelers are, what are the things that you can do to stockpile your assets to load up for next offseason. Because that phantom quarterback of who could the franchise guy be, I don't think exists. So what I would do, I'd prioritize signing Justin Fields. First and foremost, he's younger than Russ. If Fields wants too much money, then you maybe try to re-sign Russ. But like, it's not going to get much better when you're allocating more money. You have about $54 million of salary cap going to this offseason. You got to give Russ, say, 30. Let's say 30 of that per year.
Yeah.
You can't make the improvements to the rest of the roster that you need to make. So that's why I honestly think in the long run, to win a Lombardi, to win a Super Bowl, it's going to have to get worse before it gets better. And I would start positioning myself for next offseason, not this current offseason, because there's only so much you can do.
No, I like your approach to it, though. And I would only say this, man, in the sense of the Justin Fields approach, I don't necessarily think that equates to it having to get all the way worse. But a lot of that does stem more on his development. And that's the whole issue with it. It's like you take a lot more risk with it. But if he does develop, now you got the home run. You're right. You got cheap labor at the quarterback position and a guy that's playing, at a top 10 or an elite level. And we've seen how that model could definitely work. But we've also seen a lot of examples of that not working, unfortunately, as well, man.
I'll get more into the defense and more into this roster, but I'll tell you this right now, Arthur. Arch Manning, I'm a men's medium. Send over the black and gold jersey already. Like, that's where my brain is.
I'm calling it out now. I want Arch. Where you at, baby?
Like, and you might think that I'm nuts, but I look at the division and the rest of the conference when it comes to the quarterback talent. Because, look, even if the Steelers had gotten by Baltimore, they had already dug themselves too deep a deficit. You'd have had to go on the road this week to Kansas City.
Yep.
And then somehow, if you would have won that game, if all goes to chalk, on the road against Buffalo, so Jackson, Mahomes, and Allen, good luck.
Yeah. It's murderer's row. We know that's the thing, like when we're talking about the NFL as it currently stands, we look at the team, and regardless of our overall feelings on it, just from a league-wide standpoint, teams would look at the Steelers and say, yeah, based on the roster, based on quarterback play, you're more so overachieving than you are doing what is the expectation because of the quarterback position. You brought it up yourself. Joe Burrow, right? Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, heck, even Justin Herbert, who people still are kind of back and forth on because of the playoff performances. We look at all those guys as if you have one of them, you feel like you are legitimately in it every single season because you can score. And that's the thing that we haven't had, but we've been relevant. Why? Because we're getting the defense to play as well as they can at times. We're getting the offense to not turn it over. And on occasion, you have some of these hot performances. And then we happen to have a heck of a kicker in Chris Boswell. But we've seen that, man, you run into these buzzsaws when you got to go against these quarterbacks, these guys that will strain your defense. This approach doesn't work. You have to be able to score and put more pressure on those offenses.
And this can also be true. I largely think that both Fields and Wilson outperform the contracts that Pittsburgh paid them this year. Like, you were paid
$1 million and so that's not $1 million production. I promise you, not in that position.
Yeah, so I don't fault the Steelers for what they did, but it's trying to figure out who the guy is post Roethlisberger. Well,
I was going to ask you, Mark, because you brought up the $30 million for Russ. I was going to say, is that the number that you feel he has to get? Because if that number is lower, if we can get into the 20s, I think it's a different conversation. But I don't know if he's ever going to go back to 20s when he was still making 40 this year. We just weren't paying him that.
Well, the answer to that is what will the market pay him? And there's teams, the bottom of the barrel teams, someone will overpay. Now, would Russ want to leave Pittsburgh and take that if it's a lower tier organization where it's like, hey, let's try to throw something against the wall? If it's Wilson or Fields for Pittsburgh, from a big picture standpoint, and I'm talking about winning Super Bowls.
I'm with you. That's it.
Probably going to be a bridge for whoever the next guy is. And that is okay. And that is okay because you don't really have many other options unless, like,
that's the thing,
unless, like, again, you could look at the free agent quarterbacks. Unless, like, Zach Wilson tickles your fancy. What are we talking about here?
Hey, Zach Wilson could be this year's the next Sam Darnold, right? We saw him obviously in the resurgence that he had, but even the past 2 games, people are going to look at him and say, well, he turned back into who we kind of thought he was going to be.
Let me read you the list because it's not just Zach Wilson. I'd imagine Darnold will be back in Minnesota even after last night's game. Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett, Taylor Heineke, Marcus Mariota, Jared Stidham, Drew Lock, Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston. These are the quarterbacks available.
Why are you talking like this on this show? You're not supposed to talk like that. That's in a good language, man. Those are not the names you want to be saying out here. This is family friendly, baby. That is not that. No. I mean, Trey Lance, Jacoby Brissett. Stop it. Just stop. No.
Maybe you add Kirk Cousins. Maybe you add Aaron Rodgers to that list. But
no. Atlanta wants to keep Kirk as the backup, $100 million backup quarterback. That's all right.
But that quick fix, this is why I try to start stockpiling assets to load up for next offseason. If I'm Omar Khan and in that front office, you're going to have to get a little bit creative to create an opportunity to go get the guy who is going to be like a dude at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what you need to be able to do, because looking at the capital, the resources, and the free agents available, outside of a trade for like the only other thing I could think of, Arthur, and I'm stealing this from Bill Simmons, I heard him say this on his show, would be possibly to trade for J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota, because it's like I'm trying
to be interesting. Yeah, that could be interesting. Now, my whole thing is this. I don't know how Minnesota views him all the way right now, because they never got a chance to see him, and Sam Darnold comes in, wins you 14 games, and has you as a chance to be the 1 seed. But at the same time, you go 1 and down in the playoffs. Obviously, you're looking at JJ as, could you be the reason why we go further? But that's an interesting one right there with JJ. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Let's GP. I'm all with you getting him a compliment, because Roman Wilson largely didn't play, some of that due to injury. I mean, we'll see. And then there's Pickens and everyone else at the receiver position. I'm with you in terms of reallocating how the team is structured. $160 million on the defense. And yes, going away from Minkah Fitzpatrick 2 years ago in 2022 when he was an All-Pro, he had 6 takeaways, and it was like he was the team's best offensive player as a safety.
Yeah, he was scoring, he picked sixes, everything. Like, you knew Minkah was the guy that you have to account for. And then we happen to have this other guy, TJ Watt, who was absolutely going bonkers out there. Whereas now, like I said, they're still playing well, they're still producing. But when you're looking at how much they are accounting for salary cap wise, we're asking ourselves, is that production worth that value when we can look at the value of a $5 million wide receiver, the value of a $10 million wide receiver? And we're asking ourselves, how do we create that space? How do we create the funds for that? And now we're looking at those positions and we're saying, all right, this is starting to look a little bit more expendable from a cost standpoint of restructuring.
Yeah, that, and how much longer can you get all-pro production out of Cam Hayward in his mid-30s? Like,
hey, but Cam is aging like a fine wine. I don't know how he keeps doing it. It's like, yo, you shouldn't be able to keep doing it at this level at that age, but you keep proving us all wrong, man. So keep it up. But yeah, that eventually has to come to an end, right?
It's Father Time's undefeated, and that's not a knock on
that, right? Okay.
Cam outperformed what my expectations were for this year, and it's not just the production; it's the health.
Mm-hmm.
So the best ability being availability there, and so it's like, okay, I get trying to zig when the rest of the league zags with offense, but and I get it, the defense being stuck on the field because you couldn't run the ball against the Ravens. So like they always say, complimentary football, and I know it's a cliche. But what was it, 464 yards, more than 300 yards at halftime? Mm-hmm. It's like, this is just not the recipe. And we have a big enough sample size now, too, with 6 consecutive playoff losses. And it's not that way lost.
Yeah.
It's the way that you,
Yes. When you see the manner of the losses, it's almost like a disheartening feeling. And part of that is due to offensively stalling out. It's one thing to give up points. We know at this level, with some of these elite quarterbacks, you're not shutting out Patrick Mahomes. You're not going to shut out Lamar. You're not going to shut out Josh Allen. But the way that those teams, those quarterbacks, when we've seen them falter, it's because the opposing quarterback has been able to match their production. And now it becomes less of can this quarterback keep scoring and more so is their defense even good enough to get a stop? That's the whole 13 seconds Buffalo thing, right? Whereas in Pittsburgh, we don't have that firepower to come back with that. Ours is we're really going to stop you this time. Oh, all right, we got a new way we're going to stop you this time. We don't have the now let's attack you though. Like we never can get offensive. And I think in those matchups, I mean, all of them have pretty much played out like that. And that's the unfortunate part. Even, dating back to that Browns one, was that 2020 or even the Blake Bortles 2017. It's like, man, we started off slow in both of those games offensively. And then from there, you face a team in Blake Bortles who at that time got hot, played extremely well. You talk about Baker Mayfield and that Browns team, got hot, played really well that day. But the rest of the matchups is like, yeah, that's Lamar Jackson, that's Patrick Mahomes, and that's Josh Allen. You weren't favored in any of these matchups. I mean, you were 9.5-point underdogs just Saturday night, and we were kind of surprised at that. And then you look at the game, and it's like, well, are we surprised at the outcome? And we're surprised at the spread. It looks like Vegas, and a lot of people had it right.
I said this on my post-game show. Overall, the season is a success. You were picked to finish last in the division.
So it was like
Steelers were. The over-under was 8.5 wins.
I remember that. Yes.
So it's not to absolve how you finished down the stretch, but overall you overperformed what the expectations were for this season. You did. Now, again, are you content with that?
Now, Mark, you can't say the expectations. They get me on this all the time.
Okay.
Standard is Super Bowl or bust. So if you didn't win the Super Bowl, then you're okay with mediocrity. If you did not win the Super Bowl, is the standard to win 10 games or is the standard to win the Super Bowl? Is Super Bowl or bust? That's the way this communicated. So you know that, Mark. I don't know why you try to play like that. Don't do that.
Yeah, but the standard is the standard. I do agree that applies in the playoffs. Look, you got $53 million in salary cap space if you're the Steelers.
With the ability to create more, too. With the ability to create more.
Okay, I like that. Obviously, you would love to have both back, but for what price? And we talked a little bit about it with Wilson. What's your approach? Would you try to go after one before the other? Would you try to bring back both? You can't be left empty-handed. I mean,
no, 1,000%. One of the two are going to be here. I think, to me, initially, I'm going to make priority one Russ, and I'm trying to see 25. 25 is the number. And the reason why I say that is this. I look at the moments that he had this season, and there were some very high positives. We can't ignore when he started. That was it coming over in week 6, and everybody looked at Coach Tomlin, and we were like, what are you doing? That decision was validated within a couple of weeks. We were not tripping on. We were like, yo, we're glad that you made that decision. Then we hit this rough spot at the end, and I was like, yo, why did you make that decision? We're upset about it. But I don't overlook the fact that this dude missed all of training camp with the calf injury. This dude missed the first 6 weeks of the season with this calf injury. You know the amount of reps, the amount of just timing, the amount of, man, how do we just start to see things get more in sync? So now when we're facing these high caliber teams down the stretch, we're not trying to figure out if we're on the same page. We know we're on the same page. I'm not worried about if you're going to run this route at 3.5 yards. I know you're running at 3.5. You know why? Because we rep this 1,000 times. There isn't a substitute for the reps at this level. And I feel like for us, if he gets that, I think offensively we look a lot better, a lot more crisp, and you don't get the drop-off that we experienced towards the end. Because even in this Ravens game, you saw some positives. But then we saw what? Slow start to come out the gate, and then you kind of go through that lull again before it kind of gets back going. To minimize that, you have to be all the way in tune. You look at these Lamar Jackson in that offense. He's been in it for a while now. He knows all these guys to a high level. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase knows to a high level. Josh Allen, his offense, knows to a high level. So when they're playing, everybody is in sync and those quarterbacks play a lot more free. So that's why I prioritize Russ first. But if I can't get that, I'm looking at Justin. I'm saying, hey, 10 to 15. 10 to 15, 1 year, let's go. I can't give you a multi-year deal because I don't know if I want to marry you in that sense just yet. You bring up Arch Manning. It's like, yo, that could be very enticing along with some other potential free agents that could be out there at the quarterback spot. So a 10 to 15, $10 to $15 million deal is still respectable. It's still, this is good money for you at this position. And if you prove yourself, we got the ability to obviously give you a long-term contract, or you can hit the market. But I would definitely go Russ first, then Fields. But that's because of how I view both of them, though. I think that Russ is still the better, more established guy at this stage, but I don't want to give him a 2 or 3 year deal either, though, if that makes sense. I'm very short term with both of these guys until proven otherwise.
Yeah, maybe like a team option as well, if that helps.
Yeah.
At all.
Go back to those COVID deals we were giving out. You remember when it was like, this is a 4-year deal. 1 year is like for real. The other 3 are like, it was imaginary. You're like, how does that work? How did you get this 4-year deal for $100 million, but it just counts for this?
Hey man, it makes for a nice headline too, and it's always the guaranteed total, but it makes for a nice headline where you're like, but what this player got?
They signed by how much? Older than 1 year. Oh, got you. Okay, this is imaginary. Yeah.
I know a lot of people are calling for head coach Mike Tomlin's job.
Yeah.
I know he's got the no trade clause as well. I would examine trying to trade him, but I look at the opening, so he would have to agree to go to one of these other teams. Chicago, I know they've got Caleb Williams, but a disaster organization. Dallas with Terry Jones, I don't know. Jacksonville, the Jets, the Saints, the Raiders, and the Patriots are going to hire Mike Vrabel, so he would have to agree to it. I would ask him about that, though, because he has value to other teams. You could get
sounds like saying
for him.
Yeah.
But like, then I'm looking at the coaches available. And I mean, the Steelers, the way they operate, this is a testament to the Rooneys and the front office. I mean, Chuck Noll, Cowher, Tomlin, there have been more popes of the Catholic Church during that same time span. So it's like, short of bringing in Ben Johnson, who everyone else wants, again, the quick fix, the silver bullet solution does not exist in this scenario. So it's like,
and even with Ben Johnson, there isn't a guarantee that works.
Yeah.
We've seen offensive-minded coaches. We've seen a Mike McDaniel. We've seen a Cliff Kingsbury at head coach, and we've seen it falter. So there isn't a guarantee that just because a guy is great at the coordinator spot that it automatically reflects him being a head coach and having success. I mean, Arthur Smith, with all due respect to him, there's a reason why he's here with us.
Yeah.
Because he got the opportunity to be a head guy due to his success as an offensive coordinator. And it's just a different ask when you get that, added responsibility and stuff. So I don't think there is just this like surefire silver bullet that's out there right now at the moment.
Yeah, I do think it's time. I mean, it's largely been successful. Mike Tomlin's a Hall of Fame coach. I do think it's time, but until you're talking about totally overhauling the roster, I don't know that it makes sense to do that unless you say, hey, we're going to tear it all down and all players are on the table.
Yeah.
And you have essentially a garage sale.
So my question to you is, what's keeping you from having that mindset now after all the things that have kind of been talked about, especially with the postseason exits of recently?
I would do it, but it's just not how the team has traditionally operated. And it's also like, and when I say that, I don't want to trade a guy like a TJ Watt, who's one of the best defensive players in the league, for 50 cents on the dollar. Again, if there's a trade on the table where you could get multiple first-round picks and you can stockpile your assets to go take a swing for a blue-chip stud quarterback, that to me is the bigger issue than who the head coach is. There's only so much you can scheme up. We're frustrated as hell with the lack of recent playoff success. But even if you got Ben Johnson, if you got rid of Mike Tomlin and brought in Ben Johnson, you still have the same issues.
The same
at
personnel
quarterback position in the offensive. You still have those same exact issues, even if you bring someone else in. So like, that's why it's like, if I'm going to do wholesale changes, okay, then I can maybe bring a guy in to do that. But will the Steelers actually?
But we're not getting wholesale right now. Yeah.
You're trying to, the analogy I'd make to you, Arthur, is like, you're trying to repair a plane engine while the damn thing's in the air. Like,
no, seriously, that's what it is. Like, we're not stopping and we're not crashing because the pilot is like, yo, I got this. I know how to keep us going. But you're definitely right. We're trying to figure this thing out on the fly. And there are pros and cons to it. The pro is, man, you're constantly in the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
We win in 10 games this year. You won 10 games last year. It was Kenny Pickett. It was Mitch. It was Mason Rudolph. This year, it was Justin Fields. It was Russell Wilson. So it's like you feel good because you're constantly relevant. You're constantly in it. But you also feel hopeless when you face these teams. And it's like, well, the only way I can get that is either I spend a ton or I got to be really bad and hope and pray that my lottery ticket is the one, right? Because you can turn into Cleveland. You can turn into Jacksonville. We see them pick top 5 a ton, and the return on those draft picks hasn't been what a lot of those people were anticipating. And that's more common than not. It's more likely that you turn into the Jets than you hit the lottery with the Ben Roethlisberger. And that, once again, has been proven. And I think that that's the kind of back and forth that the Steelers deal with internally. I think there are, pieces or people that are intrigued by what you're breaking down, because there is a part of me that is like, yeah, that does open up some intrigue. The problem is, though, it isn't a guarantee that I can get everything that I need. And how long does it take to fully acquire these pieces? And what does the product look like during that time frame? Because as you've seen with the NFL, man, we've seen how quickly you can fall off a cliff. Ask the New England Patriots. One player leaves and that organization has went to crap. It is nowhere close to being what it once was. And we see that time and time again. Chicago's another one. You move on. Was it the Lovie Smith 11 win season?
They haven't been the same.
And from there, it's like, yo, you have been y'all have had 3 times where y'all have had the number 1 overall pick or one of the number 1 overall, like top 5 picks. Mm-hmm. And we've seen 2 of these guys already find new employment in Mr. Trubisky and Justin Fields. So with that, it's just like, at what point are you asking yourself how much exposure to risk is too much exposure to risk? Mm. We don't want to be a dumpster fire franchise. We don't want to watch bad football. And we can't confuse bad football with we're not winning a championship because we're getting beat by the elite teams. Elite teams versus bad teams. I don't think that we're either one of those. But you run the risk one way or the other, depending on which moves we're going to make. And I think that's the interesting part that organizationally they're running at. Because for us, we don't have that skin in the game. We make a random decision here, or, hey, man, we could be completely wrong on Ben Johnson. There was a ton of us that were hollering for Eric Bieniemy, and we've seen how that's played out. It didn't cost us anything. All of our jobs were still intact. Our livelihood was not impacted. When you're the person that's in there, you making those decisions and it impacts your livelihood, it affects your bottom line, you're going to be a lot more patient. You're going to have a lot more time when you're making these big changes, these big decisions, in comparison to how we would just, oh, man, I fire this dude, but I'll bring that guy in. It's like, yeah, because it doesn't cost us anything if we get it wrong.
That's really well said. And the politics and the behind the scenes of football right there. And that's why I value talking to players and former players, because that insight there, Arthur, is just spot on. Because look, think about how mad we are right now after 6 straight playoff losses. Can you imagine a season with the Pittsburgh Steelers where under Tomlin, 18 non-losing seasons, 21 before him overall? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine a Steelers season where they go like 3-14?
We'll be in here about to throw up. Like, what is this? What is this? I'm not paying for this. I'm not showing up for this. You better not play Renegade. 3 or what? Don't even play Renegade. Don't even think about it. You don't deserve Renegade. 3 wins? What? No, heck no.
At the same time, man, if you've ever played baseball, if you don't swing for the fences, you're never gonna not.
Yeah, and that's the truth. That's absolutely the truth.
And so I'm looking at it like, I just look at the division. I know Burrow and Jackson are going to be there for like the next decade, and it's like, you got to do something. You've got to do something, or you're going to keep having the same exact results. Do you want to go rapid fire here? I've got the list of the Steelers free agent players. Do you want to?
Okay, we definitely can. I was going to ask though, real quick before we got to the rapid fire, when you said do anything that you can for a quarterback, I know you have brought up Cam Ward and Shedeur.
Yeah.
Would you do whatever you could to move up to potentially draft one of those guys?
No, because
you not view either one of them as that caliber.
To get Ward, you'd have to move up all the way to number 1. And then this is where I'm a big sample size guy, Arthur. So like Cam Ward he would have been behind Caleb and Jaden in maybe around the Drake May range, maybe after Drake May from this past year. So, like, Tennessee's going to take Ward at number 1. That's, I think, inevitable. You'd have to move up too much to get him. And then Shedeur, like, look, if this isn't a quarterback-rich draft, there's going to be another team that's willing to pay more and to ransom the future for. And look, I think they're both could be really good quarterbacks in the league. But beyond those two, there's those two and everyone else. And I think because teams always need a quarterback, this isn't the draft to do it. That's just
so you wouldn't overpay for them is basically what you're saying. Because that's like when it's you'd have to bring up. Let's get that. Yeah. Right. So when we talk about the position, though, right, and we talk about the importance of it, I think if we were to say, hey, if you had to overpay to get Joe Burrow, would you do it? A lot of teams would be like, yeah, I'd overpay for that because we know it's worth it. It's proven. It's this, it's that, right? Lamar Jackson, right? We bring up some of these marquee guys like, yeah, people will definitely overpay for them. I just wanted to know, like, did you view a Shedeur or Cam Ward even worth that convo of, man, I would overpay to go get that because I think that could be the answer to what we need right now.
Ward maybe, and then Shedeur. Here's the thing, too, with quarterbacks, and you know this. There's only so many Andrew Luck, Joe Burrow, Keith Manning types.
But we said about everyone, though. You know that.
Franchise fit and personnel and really coaching is hell of a lot more important than, they're only, like the John Elway, like the types where it's like, doesn't matter the system they go to.
He's flawless. Yeah, it's going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer your question, no relative to what the Steelers have right now. I mean, you'd have to give up way too much. All right, rapid fire, and these are just, we went through Russ and who else in Fields already. Najee Harris.
Yes, but under $8 million.
Yeah, I'm with you there at the 5th-year option on the salary cap at 6.6. This is not a deep quarterback class. It's a loaded running back.
It is. It definitely is.
So we'll see there. I think Van Jefferson's probably gone.
Yeah.
Mike Williams, I think, depends on the price. I'd like to see more of him. I thought they should have got him the
full off season. Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm keeping everything intact in terms of coordinator, if I get Russ or Fields, if I have one of those coming back, then I don't hate bringing them back, but that number has to be right. I'm not paying a ton for him. Like, I don't feel like the production was there, whether you're talking Jets or Steelers. And we know part of Jets was, it was the Jets. It was chaotic over there.
Yeah.
All season was a little bit weird because of him coming back from injury. But we also know it's a results-based league. And you have to have more production. But I definitely see the talent. And that's the other part. Like, he did flash at times this season.
All right. James Daniels, guard position.
No, he can go. Yeah, he's going.
Yeah, I mean,
I like what I saw from McCormick, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nate Herbig at the offensive line, either center or guard.
Yeah, he's gone. He's gone. Oh, actually, Seumalo is what? 1 year left, right?
I'd have to look at Seumalo's deal.
I'm about to say if Seumalo's still under contract, then I'm cool with Herbig leaving. If Seumalo is not under contract, I like Herbig. I'll keep him at least for that left guard spot as a placeholder.
Yeah, you've got one more year of Seumalo in 2025 before he's due to become an unrestricted free agent in 2026. Dan Moore Jr.
I want to keep Dan. I want to keep.
Okay.
I want to keep Dan. I'm a Dan Moore guy. I like Dan.
I'm going to argue against that.
Each and every season. All right, he's gotten better each and every season. He's still going to be cheap labor. He was a 4th rounder that has clearly overachieved to the point where we couldn't get our 1st round draft pick at the left tackle spot. Now, after that, we know at the right tackle spot we had an injury, so it kind of kept him over there. But even this season, there were multiple games where we were not hollering about Dan Moore and his blocking and his effort and his production. We know the guy that we were talking about. It wasn't Dan. Dan got rough at the end. Dan definitely got rough from at the end. And that's why I feel like it knocked the number back down to a more affordable rate. Mm-hmm. So that's why I want to keep him. It doesn't mean that I don't have a belief in Broderick. It doesn't mean that I don't have faith that Troy Fautanu can still be available. But I do feel like I have a guy that I know can start at this level without the, can Broderick go over here and play left now? Is Broderick going to just be a way better left, or is Broderick going to look like how he's looked at right tackle, where we have some moments where we feel good, we have some moments where we desire more. We know right tackle is one thing. When you're at that left tackle spot, the importance of it. I'm not ready to just move on from Dan Moore unless that number is crazy. But when I think of what the deal we gave Chooks Secor for, he was nowhere near as polished or productive at that stage when we paid him. And to me, I think Dan has proven to be the more consistent and better player throughout his time as a starter. So that's my argument for Dan Moore, man.
I have a lot of fans that are like, "Oh, is he still on the roster?" I'm like, "You understand he's still on his rookie deal, right? And he doesn't get hurt.
It's super cheap. He's available every week." Yeah.
If they re-sign Dan Moore, that means they goofed up on either Broderick or Troy Fautanu, and that scares me. It's both first-round picks. Like,
yes,
front offices don't want to look bad. So it's like,
so Mark, this was my issue. When both tackles were healthy and they decided to put Broderick on the bench and keep Troy at right tackle, I said, okay. That, to me, was a message. It wasn't Troy is back, Broderick, you're going to go to left. It was Troy is back, Broderick, you're on the sideline. You're the guy you're the extra, like, you'll rotate in. That was because everybody assumed that, this is Dan Moore. Dan Moore, you're out of here. But that was the part that kind of told me, I don't think that they were all the way sold that Broderick was a better player than Dan Moore at that stage. Now, obviously, new information that could have changed in terms of how they evaluate the guys. But to me, that was telling, because why would you do that if you're the first rounder and that's the first rounder and we're talking a year apart? I'm not about to have one of you guys on the sideline and you play left tackle, you play right tackle. No, You get out there, you're my right, you're my left, and we'll figure the rest of it out. Unless you don't feel like he was ready.
All right. We need a few more. Landon Roberts.
Oh, I want him to come back, but I'm gonna let him leave. Let Peyton Wilson, man, get the keys to the car now. Yeah.
And I don't know if Cole Holcomb will be back either. So it's like, yeah. So, man,
it's a little overkill.
Needing the thumper, I really like it. Roberts, but I hear you. Dante Jackson at the cornerback position.
I want him back. But what's that number going to be? Because he did have 5 interceptions.
Yeah. Cam Sutton.
Cheap deal, yes.
Okay.
And I think he needs a full off season. And I think it'll help Benny Bishop out also. I think those two guys could work really well together. And I think it'll help Benny develop into the player we want him to develop into.
DeMonte Casey is the last of the unrestricted free agents.
Think I'm like Casey head. I think I'm gonna let him go.
All right,
let him leave.
All right. The only other guy, he's a restricted free agent, Jalen Warren. I definitely want Jalen Warren.
Yeah, we got
it. You got to pair him. I don't think he can just be like. I think he is a great change of pace guy. I love Jalen Warren. There needs to be someone else in a 1-2 tandem.
Now, question: would you go with more of a speedier tandem? I know people are brought up like Ashton Genty or like that type of running back versus what we've currently had with Najee being the real like power puncher. Would you go with more of that speedier tandem, pairing Jalen Warren with another guy like him? Or do you kind of like the bigger body back like we got with Najee?
I think I'm going to go speed. And the reason why is just the way that the league has changed. I know the physicality you think of with Najee Harris, but I look at the production. This is not all his fault given the injuries along the
No, that's right. Yeah.
I think it was the early December game against Cincinnati. He had 100 scrimmage yards. Rushing and receiving. And then the last rushing game, he had more than 100 yards. It was October the 28th. It was the 3-game stretch of the 2 New York teams, which are terrible this year, and then Las Vegas. The whole notion of Najee was like...
It's usually a reverse order for him.
Yes, and it's usually November, December, January. You don't want to tackle the guy, and he gets better as the season goes along. 29 yards of rushing against the Baltimore Ravens. And so, again...
Can't happen. Yeah,
you're mad about the defense, but you know this as a former defensive player when you're stuck on the field because your offense can't sustain drives.
Yeah, absolutely, come on now. Yeah, and it's only so many times you're going to stop these high-powered offenses as well, and that's the other part. We say the reason why a great defense is great is because they're on the sideline. They don't have to keep going out there and dodging the bullet. because eventually you're going to get hit. Eventually it's going to happen because of how talented they are. And we know how the rules are as well. So with that, offense and their ability to maintain drives matter a lot.
Yeah. There are two things I want to ask you about your playing career, and we'll go.
Mm-hmm.
The last time the Steelers won a playoff game, you were on the Steelers, but the season afterwards, this is Christmas Day of 2017. This is one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Hey, Vince.
Vince Williams trolling DeAndre Hopkins.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you remember about this?
Oh my gosh, man. First off, it was crazy because that was my first Christmas in Texas. So I have never seen like 80 degrees on Christmas Day. I'm used to it being cold, snowy, whether it's in Virginia, up in Buffalo before I came to Pittsburgh. So that part was like weird. But man, I just remember we were whooping them in the game because we were like, yo, we got to get this win. It was going to clinch our playoff spot. So the game was going how we wanted it to go. We're having a blast. And man, I just remember Vince, like we see the missed pass and D-Hop is on the ground. And Vince just gets down and we're like, is he hurt? And when he gets up, like we see everybody like pushing this stuff. And so initially we don't catch what happens. They show like the camera like gets a replay of it. And we're like, oh. And we all instantly started dying laughing after the game because, like I said, we beat them bad. We obviously get on social media, and now the clip is like going nuts. And we're just like, yo, Vince, bro, like, what were you thinking? He's like, hey, man, I'm just having fun, man. But during that time frame, man, we were feeling so good, man. We were such a close group. And, you know, just that was the fourth year of kind of our run together. So all of us felt confident. All of us knew what we were. And that was probably our best regular season. Obviously, the season didn't end how we wanted it to with us losing to the Jags. But as a whole, that was the one year where we said from start to finish, like regular season wise, we felt like we executed and did everything that we kind of set out to do. And yeah, if it's a catch, then we would have had the one seed as well, which was the big goal. But such is life, such is life. But yeah, man, shout out to my man Vince.
By all accounts, he was one of the most like badass dudes on the team.
Oh, 1,000%.
So like everyone I've heard where it was like the one dude you would take to a fight with you and come would be.
Remember, I'm gonna paint that boy on sight. That's the whole perfect. That's meet you at the 50-yard line. That's him, and he stands on it. That's who he is through and through. Like, love Vince, man, heck of a dude. Obviously, he's doing his coaching stuff now with the team, man, and you know, he's really impacting the guys in a positive way that way. But yeah, you talk about a guy that at one moment you're like, you're the craziest person I know, but then can flip a switch and he like so articulate and so like, well, man, I'm just like, who is this guy? What is this? I don't know this guy. All right, but that's Vince, man. That's Vince, baby. Heck yeah.
All right, and then I got to ask you too. I'm doing my research for the show on Wikipedia. Like, how often are you asked about the Brett Favre hit that it is consecutive game streak?
I mean, it's one of my things, man. You know, so I don't shy away from it, man. That's one of my favorite plays in my career. It blew me up in the sense of putting me on the NFL map. And it just so happened that for some people, man, their best play or their most memorable play is against a guy that nobody knows or nobody remembers. I'm fortunate that one of my best professional plays is against a Hall of Famer, man, one of the greatest quarterbacks that we ever saw, man, the true gunslinger in terms of Brett Favre, a guy that I was a fan of growing up watching. Like, I remember watching him win the Super Bowl against the Patriots. I remember watching this dude, like, it's Brett Favre, the Wrangler man, you know, put the jeans on, like, it's Favre, you know? So for me to get that opportunity, man, and I just think of the pregame with my college teammate who had just got signed, and we're going through the warm-ups, and I'm just watching him in awe. It's Favre. It's Favre. Look at the man go. It's Favre. Got some great hair, but it's Favre.
Yeah.
And then you get out there, you have that play that, you know, really put me, like I said, on the map from a defensive standpoint in the NFL and was just a solid foundation for my career, man. So, heck yeah, that's one of the plays, man, that I would never forget. But yeah, I don't shy away from it. I'm like, it was a clean hit. It was a good play. It was preparation, opportunity, and execution, man.
Yeah, a great hit, and I'd imagine he's not sending you any Wranglers, and if you know for Christmas or your birthday.
I reached out on a couple of occasions. Yeah, he has not. He has not spoken to me. So maybe one of these days we will cross paths, man. But I was just like, you know what? We're always connected. So you know, whenever they bring up, it's the Hall of Famer, longest consecutive start streak, 297 games. How did it end?
He's running on. Yeah. Pull that up. Oh, you got YouTube, man?
Hey, man, just it's got a clip for you. All right.
I love it. He's the one and only Arthur Moats. Arthur, if there's anything you need to plug, the floor is yours.
No, man, I appreciate you as always, man. Anytime you want my content, man, I'm on YouTube. Just type in Arthur Moats, man. You'll find me up there. Have a website as well, arthurmoats.com, man, where you'll see a lot of the content that gets posted. My book, The Moats Theory of Life as well. So, that's pretty much where I'm at with it, man. And obviously on all social media platforms, man, just type in my name. I'm always verified, and it's at TheBody52.
All right. We will make sure your contact information, your social media information is in the show notes so people can check you out. Hey, cheer up Deke as well. Again, like that.
Hey, look, man, I'm going to give him a hug with a terrible towel or something, man. All right, like, geez, man.
The podcaster's curse. We're recording this morning of Tuesday, January 14th. We'll know more this afternoon. Mike Tomlin's having his year-end news conference, so we'll know more here this afternoon. Hopefully you enjoyed this show.
Get spicy.
Yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see. Thank you to Arthur Moats, today's guest. Thank you to today's presenting sponsor, BetOnline. If you enjoyed Bleav in Steelers, 5 stars only. Apple and Spotify. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on the Mark Bergin YouTube page. Again, thank you to Arthur Moats. My name is Mark Bergin. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. So long, everybody.